The image of the stranger in her bed hit Kendra Ives before she even dropped her nursing bag at the door. A sight far colder than the sterile hospital rooms she worked in. She was a woman completely dismantled. Just hours earlier, she had stood in the suffocating silence of her apartment, watching Damon Wright, the man she was supposed to marry in few days, scrambling out of their shared sheets with another woman. He was discarding their future without a second thought, leaving Kendra with nothing but a shattered soul and a solemn vow to never let a man close enough to destroy her again. She had expected her midnight graveyard shift at the private clinic to be her sanctuary, a place to numb the trauma of a betrayal that felt like a life sentence. Instead, she found a fresh kind of hell. The night shift did not meet the broken nurse with a peaceful routine. It met her with the metallic scent of blood and the terrifying reality of the criminal underworld. As Kendra retreated into the robotic, emotionless motions of her job, the trauma eroded what little empathy she had left, leaving her a ghost in the blue scrubs she once wore with pride. She was trapped in a cycle of heartbreak, completely unaware that her vow to never heal another man was about to be violently tested. Kendra Ives spent years nurturing a man who tossed her out like yesterday's trash the moment his lust wandered. Now, Oh Kyung-Ho, a bleeding, ruthless Korean mafia legend, had just breached her sanctuary, ready to demand her medical expertise and force her into a secret marriage at gunpoint. Be honest. If you were Kendra, standing over a lethal mob boss just days after your fiancé shattered your world, would you have the strength to survive, or would you have lost hope entirely? Before we proceed, I would love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments, and also subscribe to this channel if you are new here. Now, let's dive into the story. The ivory silk of her wedding dress looked like a sick joke resting at the bottom of the trash can. Kendra stood frozen in the hallway of the apartment she shared with Damon. The air felt heavy, choking her with every breath she tried to take. Just minutes ago, she had walked through the front door, exhausted from a long shift. She expected to find her fiancé planning their honeymoon. Instead, she found him tangled in their bedsheets with another woman. The sound of his frantic apologies still rang in her ears, but it sounded like cheap noise. Damon had looked her right in her expressive, emotional eyes and lied. He threw away 5 years of trust for a meaningless moment. Days before she was supposed to walk down the aisle, her entire world crashed into a million sharp pieces. She did not yell or scream. She simply packed a small bag, leaving her ring on the kitchen counter. As Kendra walked out into the freezing city rain, a dark, heavy numbness settled deep inside her chest. The pain was so sharp it felt like a physical wound, bleeding out all the warmth and compassion she had always carried. She had spent her whole life fixing people, caring for them, and pouring her heart out. Look where it got her. Standing under the glow of a street lamp, shivering and alone, Kendra made a silent, iron vow. She would never open her heart again. She would never heal another man's pain. Her heart would turn to solid stone, completely safe from anyone who might try to break it again. The private medical clinic was completely silent, filled only with a soft hum of fluorescent lights. Kendra sat behind the front desk, staring blankly at a patient chart. It had been 3 days since the horrible betrayal that destroyed her life. Since that night, she had worked back-to-back graveyard shifts. The hospital was her only escape. She wore her slightly wrinkled light blue medical scrubs like a suit of armor. Moving through the quiet halls, she was completely cold and robotic. The other nurses whispered about her blank stare and her rigid posture, but Kendra did not care. She was completely, emotionally dead. She only wanted to do her job and go back to her empty motel room. Around 2 in the morning, the heavy glass doors of the clinic slid open with a sharp swoosh. The freezing night air rushed into the waiting room. Kendra did not look up right away, assuming it was just a late delivery. But then she heard a heavy, dragging footstep. A thick drop of dark liquid splashed onto the spotless white floor tiles. Then another. Kendra finally lifted her head, her dark eyes narrowing in confusion. A massive shadow leaned heavily against the glass wall. The figure was barely standing, breathing in short, harsh gasps. The man took another step toward the counter, leaving a terrible trail of thick red blood across her clean floor. Before Kendra could even press the emergency button under the desk, the tall stranger collapsed into a nearby chair. The metallic smell of fresh blood filled the quiet room, breaking Kendra out of her safe, frozen world. Kendra rushed around the counter, her nursing instincts briefly taking over her frozen heart. But as she got closer to the bleeding man, she stopped dead in her tracks. The man sitting in the chair was not just any random victim. He was tall and muscular, with sharp, sculpted features and a light golden complexion. His black hair was styled in a perfect undercut, screaming power and strict discipline. He wore an expensive white dress shirt that was now soaked in dark red blood around his shoulder. As the shirt fell open, it revealed a powerful chest covered in bold, black tattoos. The complex ink wrapped around his neck like dark armor. Kendra felt a cold wave of pure terror wash over her. She knew those tattoos from the evening news. This was Oh Kyung-Ho, the legendary and cruel boss of the city's most feared Korean mafia. His dark, cold eyes slowly locked onto her face. Even though he was bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound, his gaze was intense and calculating. He did not look weak. He looked like a trapped predator waiting to strike. "No hospitals," he commanded, his voice a low, rough rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "Fix it here." Kendra backed away, her hands shaking slightly. If she helped him, she would be dragged into a dangerous criminal underworld. If she called the police, his men would probably hunt her down before the sun came up. She was trapped in a tiny room with a wounded monster, and the heavy silence between them felt completely suffocating and deadly. Kendra crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hide the slight shaking of her hands. She looked the dangerous mafia boss right in the eye. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly steady and clear. "I am not treating you." Kyung-Ho blinked, clearly shocked by her answer. People usually begged for their lives when he looked at them. "I swore a vow," Kendra continued, her rich brown face turning hard and cold. "I will never heal another man again. You need to leave my clinic right now." The mafia legend studied her face. He saw the subtle gloss on her lips and the deep vulnerability hiding behind her brave eyes. He saw a woman who had been shattered by someone else, yet she still stood tall against a deadly mob boss. A strange spark of respect flashed in his dark, calculating eyes. He was impressed by her fierce defiance despite her obvious brokenness. But he was losing too much blood, and he did not have time for games. Moving faster than a wounded man should, Kyung-Ho reached into his dark jacket. He pulled out a heavy black gun and pointed it directly at her chest. "You are going to fix my shoulder, little bird," he growled, fighting through the terrible pain. "If I bleed to death on this floor tonight, my men will make sure you die right next to me. So you can either heal me, or you can die with me. Choose right now." Kendra stared down the barrel of the weapon. Her vow to turn her heart to stone was finally being put to the ultimate test. Kendra quickly put on her white latex gloves, her hands moving with forced, robotic speed. She pressed thick gauze against his bleeding shoulder, trying to ignore the heat of his skin and the danger in his eyes. Just as she finished wrapping the tight bandage, the heavy clinic doors swung open again. 3 men in perfectly tailored dark suits marched into the room. One of them carried a sleek leather briefcase. Kendra stepped back, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs. She was totally surrounded by the mafia. Kyung-Ho buttoned his ruined shirt with one hand, his posture instantly turning dominant and commanding again. "You saved my life, but now you know my face and my location," Kyung-Ho stated coldly. "I cannot let you walk away and testify against my syndicate." The man with the briefcase stepped forward, pulling out a thick stack of legal documents. He was the syndicate's private lawyer. "We're going to make a deal," Kyung-Ho demanded, his dark eyes burning into hers. "You're going to sign this contract. You will become my wife tonight." A wife cannot be forced to testify against her husband in a court of law. Kendra gasped, her mind spinning with pure horror. She had just survived a terrible betrayal by her fiancé, and now this cruel legend was forcing her into a secret marriage. He grabbed her hand, smearing a drop of his own blood onto the crisp white paper. He pushed a silver pen into her trembling fingers. Trapped and terrified, the broken nurse signed her name on the blood-soaked contract, chaining her life to a monster. The sleek black car pulled up to a towering glass building in the center of the city. Kendra was pushed inside the private elevator by two silent guards. When the metal doors slid open, she stepped into an ultra-modern luxury penthouse. The massive room had high ceilings and wide windows that showed the glowing city skyline. It was beautiful, but to Kendra, it was just a giant, expensive prison. She was absolutely furious and completely terrified. Just hours ago, she was a normal nurse trying to forget a terrible breakup. Now, she was legally married to a deadly Korean mafia boss. Kyung-Ho was carried into the master bedroom by his men, leaving Kendra alone in the huge living area. She paced back and forth across the dark hardwood floors, her hands pulled into tight fists. Her heart pounded with a wild, trapped energy. She ran to the heavy front door, but it was locked tight from the outside. She ran to the elevator, but it needed a special key card to move. She was trapped in a golden cage, completely cut off from the real world. Kendra sank onto a plush velvet sofa, wrapping her arms around her knees. She looked down at her hands, which were still faintly stained with his blood. The quiet hum of the city far below felt like a cruel joke. She had promised to turn her heart to stone and protect herself from any more pain. Instead, she had been dragged into a dark, violent nightmare where she had no power, no escape, and no idea if she would live to see tomorrow. The penthouse was completely dark and silent when the first groan echoed from the master bedroom. Kendra tried to ignore the painful sound. She lay on the living room sofa, staring at the ceiling and holding tightly to her bitter vow. Let the monster suffer, she told herself. He forced her into this nightmare, and he deserved the pain. But another sharp, ragged gasp broke through the quiet night. Kendra closed her eyes tightly, fighting a desperate battle inside her own mind. She swore she would never heal another man, but she was still a dedicated nurse. The deep instinct to save a life was carved into her very bones. With a heavy sigh, she threw off her blanket and grabbed the medical kit. When she walked into the huge bedroom, Kyung-Ho was thrashing on the bed. His light golden skin was covered in a thick, shining layer of sweat. A dangerous fever was burning through his strong body, turning his tattoos into a dark blur. Kendra rushed to his side, her anger melting into pure focus. She quickly checked his shoulder wound, cleaning the infection and giving him strong medicine from her bag. She found a cool, wet cloth and gently pressed it against his burning forehead. For hours in the dead of night, the broken nurse sat beside the deadly mafia boss. She smoothed his dark hair and spoke in a soft, calming whisper until his breathing finally slowed down. Even though she hated him for trapping her, a tiny crack of true compassion broke through her frozen, stone heart. The bright morning sun poured through the huge glass windows, lighting up the penthouse. Kyung-Ho slowly opened his eyes, feeling the heavy fog of the fever finally lifting from his brain. His shoulder throbbed with a dull ache, but he was alive. He turned his head and saw Kendra sitting in a chair near his bed. The dark-skinned nurse was fast asleep, her head resting awkwardly against the wall. She looked completely exhausted. The subtle gloss on her lips was gone, and her beautiful face was marked by deep, quiet sorrow. Kyung-Ho stared at her with his intense, calculating eyes. He remembered the soft touch of her hands during the night and the gentle way she cooled his burning skin. She had saved his life when she easily could have let him die. As he watched her sleep, he noticed the fresh, painful tear stains on her cheeks. He finally understood her fierce words from the clinic. She was not just angry about being kidnapped. She was a woman who had been deeply and cruelly wronged by someone she trusted. A strange, dark feeling began to spark inside the cold mafia legend. It was not just gratitude. It was a silent, intense, and possessive interest. Whoever had broken this beautiful, compassionate woman was a complete fool. Kyung-Ho had spent his entire life destroying his enemies and ruling the underworld with absolute power. Now, looking at his new wife, he felt a powerful urge to shield her. The dangerous beast inside him was fully awake, and it wanted to protect her wounded heart. Later that afternoon, Kyung-Ho called Kendra into his private study. The room was filled with rich, dark wood and expensive leather furniture. He sat behind a massive desk, his injured arm resting in a black silk sling. He looked commanding, wealthy, and incredibly dangerous. Kendra stood near the door, keeping her distance with a cautious, straight posture. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice a smooth, absolute rumble. "We need to establish the rules of our secret marriage." Kendra slowly sat in a chair across from him, crossing her arms defensively. "Rule number 1, he stated strictly. You will never try to run away. If you run, you will put both of our lives in extreme danger. Rule number 2, you will live here, and you will act as my personal nurse until I am fully healed." Kendra glared at him, her emotional eyes flashing with sharp anger. "And what do I get in return for being your prisoner?" she demanded bravely. Kyung-Ho leaned forward, his sharp jawline tightening. "You get my total protection and you get my respect," he replied honestly. "Rule number 3 is for me. You are my legal wife on paper, but I will never force myself on you. I will not cross your physical boundaries unless you give me permission." Kendra blinked in surprise. She expected the cruel mafia boss to be a total monster in every way. Instead, he was being surprisingly respectful of her personal space. He was a terrifying dictator who ordered people around, but he was also offering her a strange, highly disciplined sense of safety. Kendra stood in the massive marble bathroom, letting the hot shower wash away the stress of the past few days. While the water ran, she left her personal cell phone resting on the kitchen counter. Kyung-Ho was sitting on the velvet sofa nearby, reviewing some business files with his good hand. Suddenly, the phone buzzed loudly against the counter. The bright screen lit up with a new message. Kyung-Ho glanced over, intending to ignore it, but the name on the screen caught his sharp attention. The text was from a man named Damon. The mafia boss stood up and walked over to the phone, his cold eyes narrowing. He looked at the locked screen and read the uninvited messages popping up. "Kendra, please answer me," the text read. "I am the victim here. You overreacted. Come back to the apartment and bring me my expensive ring." Kyung-Ho felt his blood instantly turn to freezing ice. He stared at the glowing words, his mind quickly connecting the pieces of her broken heart. This selfish coward was the man who betrayed his new wife. This was the fool who made her swear off love and cry herself to sleep. A dark, lethal jealousy exploded inside the wounded legend. His powerful chest heaved as he gripped the edge of the counter. Damon had destroyed her trust and was now trying to manipulate her from the shadows. Kyung-Ho memorized the phone number with a deadly, calculating focus. No one was allowed to disrespect his wife. The cruel mafia boss was ready to hunt. Kyung-Ho wore a perfectly tailored black suit that hid his heavy bandages. He stood in the shadows of the dirty parking garage, waiting for the foolish man who broke his wife's heart. Damon walked toward his cheap car, looking at his phone and still trying to send selfish messages to Kendra. Suddenly, 2 massive guards stepped out of the darkness, blocking his path. Damon froze in pure terror as the legendary mafia boss slowly walked forward. Kyung-Ho did not yell or pull out a weapon. He stood with absolute dominance and a cold, calculating gaze. "You are Damon," Kyung-Ho said, his voice a smooth, polite rumble that sounded like a death sentence. Damon nodded, shaking like a terrified leaf. "Kendra is now under my complete protection," the mafia boss continued, his sharp jawline looking carved from dangerous stone. "She is my wife. If you ever text her phone, speak her name, or even look in her direction again, I will personally erase you from this earth." Damon gasped, his face turning pale as he finally realized who was standing in front of him. He quickly nodded, promising to disappear forever. Kyung-Ho turned around and walked back to his sleek black car, leaving the coward shaking in the dark. When he returned to the luxury penthouse, Kendra was quietly drinking tea by the massive windows. He did not say a single word about his secret trip. He only watched her with a fierce, possessive pride, completely satisfied that he had protected her fragile peace from the shadows. The soft lamps in the penthouse cast a warm, golden glow over the master bedroom. Kendra gently removed the old bandages from Kyung-Ho's healing shoulder. His powerful chest was exposed, showing the bold, black tattoos that wrapped around his neck like dark armor. Without thinking, her slender fingers reached out to trace a complex dragon design near his collarbone. Her touch was incredibly light, but it sent an electric shock straight through his muscular frame. "What does this ink mean?" Kendra whispered softly, her expressive eyes looking up at his sharp face. Kyung-Ho looked down at her, his cold gaze finally softening into a quiet reverence. "It represents surviving a betrayal," he rumbled, his voice low and heavy with old pain. "My own brother tried to take my life for power. The ink covers the scars he gave me." Kendra felt a sudden, sharp ache in her chest. She understood that kind of deep, terrible betrayal perfectly. "My deepest scar is not on my skin," Kendra admitted, her rich brown face turning sad as she thought of her ruined wedding dress. "I gave Damon everything I had. I planned a whole future, and he threw it in the trash for nothing." Kyung-Ho slowly lifted his good hand and gently wiped a stray tear from her cheek. "He was a weak fool who could not handle a true queen," the mafia boss stated with absolute honesty. In that quiet, vulnerable moment, the broken nurse and the wounded legend shared their darkest pain, slowly building a real bridge of trust inside their golden cage. A heavy black box tied with a shiny silk ribbon was sitting on the plush velvet sofa when Kendra finally woke up. Kyung-Ho stood near the giant glass windows, his posture strictly commanding in a dark, expensive tuxedo. "We are attending an elite underground gala tonight," he announced smoothly, turning to face her. "You are my legal wife, and the dangerous underworld needs to see that I am not weak or hiding." Kendra instantly felt a rushing wave of nervous panic. She wanted to refuse, but she clearly remembered the strict rules of their secret arrangement. When she slowly opened the beautiful box, she found a breathtaking ivory satin gown. The soft fabric looked incredibly romantic and wildly expensive. Hours later, she stepped out of the massive bathroom, looking absolutely stunning. The sleek gown hugged her natural curves perfectly, and her tightly coiled hair was styled in an elegant, high puff. Kyung-Ho stared at her with a fierce, possessive intensity that made her breath catch right in her throat. He gently placed a massive diamond necklace around her neck, his warm hands carefully lingering on her glowing dark skin. The car ride to the grand mansion was completely silent, filled with a heavy, electric tension. When they finally walked into the crowded, glittering ballroom, every single eye turned to stare at the legendary boss and his beautiful new bride. Kendra felt completely terrified of the wealthy criminals surrounding her, but Kyung-Ho placed his strong hand firmly on her lower back. His touch was a powerful, silent promise that he would be her absolute protection shield against the cruel world. The glittering gala was filled with rich, powerful people holding crystal glasses of expensive champagne. Kendra tried to stay close to Kyung-Ho, feeling totally out of place in her gorgeous ivory gown. Suddenly, a harsh, nasty laugh cut through the polite music. Kendra completely froze. Standing just a few feet away was the exact same woman she had caught in bed with Damon. The woman wore a cheap, flashy red dress and smirked cruelly as she walked over. "Well, look who finally decided to show her face," the woman mocked loudly, hoping to embarrass the broken nurse in front of the elite crowd. "Damon told me you were crying in a dirty motel. I guess you found a sugar daddy to pay your bills." Kendra felt her wounded dignity burn, her dark eyes filling with hot, angry tears. Before she could even say a word, Kyung-Ho stepped firmly in front of her. The deadly mafia boss did not yell, but his silent dominance instantly froze the entire room. He looked at the cruel woman like She was an annoying insect on his expensive shoe. Security, Kyung-Ho commanded, his low rumble sending a lethal chill through the air. Remove this piece of trash. She is insulting my beautiful wife, the queen of my syndicate. The woman's smug smile vanished in pure horror as huge guards immediately dragged her kicking and screaming out of the grand doors. Kyung-Ho gently kissed Kendra's hand right in front of the silent, shocked crowd, permanently elevating her status and proving that nobody was allowed to disrespect her ever again. The sleek armored car ride back to the penthouse was quiet, but the heavy tension from the dramatic party was finally gone. When they stepped into the quiet luxury of their golden cage, Kendra let out a long, exhausted sigh. She kicked off her painful high heels and sank into the soft velvet sofa, completely ignoring how expensive her ivory satin gown was. Kyung-Ho took off his tuxedo jacket and poured 2 glasses of cold water, handing one gently to his tired wife. You did very well tonight, he said softly, sitting carefully beside her to protect his healing shoulder. Kendra looked at the dangerous mafia boss who had just defended her honor in front of the city's worst criminals. The terrible memory of Damon's betrayal felt surprisingly far away. For the very first time since her whole world crashed down, the broken nurse felt truly safe. A small, genuine smile finally broke through her serious, emotional face. It was a beautiful, glowing smile that reached all the way to her expressive dark eyes. Kyung-Ho completely froze, captivated by her natural beauty and her sudden warmth. The dangerous distance between them slowly vanished as he leaned closer, completely drawn to her subtle gloss lips. The quiet air crackled with a dangerously close, electric energy. His tattooed hand gently cupped her warm, rich brown cheek, his thumb brushing against her soft skin. Kendra did not pull away from his touch. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting her sworn vow slowly melt away under the intense, protective heat of the wounded legend. The dark city was full of dangerous secrets, but news of the Korean mafia boss spread like a wildfire. In the dirty, hidden corners of the criminal underworld, cruel men began to whisper. They talked about the glittering gala and the beautiful black woman in the ivory satin gown. For years, Oh Kyung-Ho had ruled his massive empire with cold, absolute dominance. He never showed mercy, and he never had a single weakness. But now, his enemies smiled in the shadows. They believed the fierce, wounded legend had finally made a huge mistake. He cared about his new wife. To the rival syndicates, Kendra Ives was not a right-hand queen. She was a golden target. If they could capture the broken nurse, they could completely destroy the unstoppable king. Kyung-Ho knew the danger was growing. He doubled the security around the luxury penthouse, making sure his beautiful wife was always perfectly safe. He spent hours in his dark study, watching camera feeds and tracking his greedy enemies. Kendra noticed the heavy, tense mood in his dark eyes. She saw the tight lines on his sharp jawline when he looked out the massive windows. She was no longer just a trapped prisoner in a golden cage. She was standing right in the middle of a deadly mafia war. The quiet peace they had shared after the gala was quickly fading away. The dangerous beast was preparing for a brutal fight, and the whole city held its breath, waiting for the first drop of blood to fall. The sleek, armored black car rolled smoothly down the empty highway. Kendra sat quietly beside Kyung-Ho, watching the bright city lights blur past the thick glass. He was taking her to a highly secure clinic to check the medical supplies. Suddenly, a heavy silver truck smashed violently into the side of their vehicle. The loud, terrible sound of bending metal completely shattered the quiet night. Kendra screamed in pure terror as the world spun wildly out of control. Before she could even understand what was happening, loud gunshots started ringing out. Bullets hit the reinforced windows like angry hail. Without a single second of hesitation, the wounded legend moved. Kyung-Ho threw his large, muscular frame completely over Kendra. He used his broad shoulders and his own body as an absolute protection shield, crushing her down into the safe floorboards. The cruel enemies outside kept firing, desperate to end his life. Kendra squeezed her emotional eyes shut, shaking with deep, cold fear. She could hear Kyung-Ho grunting softly above her as the car finally skidded to a violent halt. His strong arms held her incredibly tight, refusing to let her go. He did not care about his own healing shoulder. He only cared about keeping his wife completely safe from the deadly storm. Finally, the roaring engines of the enemy truck faded away into the dark night. The ambush had failed. Kyung-Ho slowly lifted his heavy body off her, his cold gaze scanning the broken street. He was still breathing firmly, but the dangerous reality of their marriage was now perfectly clear. The luxury penthouse felt like a safe fortress after the terrifying chaos on the highway. Kendra dragged Kyung-Ho into the master bedroom, her heart still pounding wildly against her ribs. She was completely panicked. Her hands shook violently as she grabbed her medical kit. The mafia boss sat calmly on the edge of the plush bed. His expensive dark shirt was torn, showing small, bloody grazes along his ribs and his strong arms. The flying glass from the ambush had cut his skin, but he did not look bothered at all. "You are bleeding again," Kendra cried out, her voice cracking with deep fear. She quickly wiped his cuts with soft, wet gauze. Her nursing instincts took over, but this time it was different. She was not just treating a random patient. She was desperately terrified of losing the man who had just risked everything for her. Kyung-Ho watched her beautiful, worried face. He saw the tears shining in her dark eyes. Suddenly, his tattooed hand reached out and gently grabbed her wrist. He pulled her close, forcing her to drop the bloody cloth. "Look at me, Kendra," he commanded softly, his voice a low, heavy rumble. She looked up, completely caught in his intense, burning gaze. "I told you I would protect you," the wounded legend whispered with absolute honesty. "I would bleed 1,000 times if it kept you safe. I will always be your shield." The broken nurse felt a massive wave of emotion crash into her stone heart, melting her final defenses away. The heavy silence in the bedroom was completely charged with wild, electric energy. The deep fear from the sudden ambush slowly melted into a burning, undeniable passion. Kendra looked into Kyung-Ho's dark, possessive eyes and realized she no longer wanted to run away. The stone walls she had built around her shattered heart finally crumbled into dust. She leaned forward, closing the tiny distance between them. When her soft, glossed lips finally touched his, a massive spark ignited. Kyung-Ho groaned, wrapping his strong arms tightly around her waist. He kissed her with fierce, absolute hunger, pouring all his protective love into the deep connection. The dangerous mafia legend was completely gentle with her, treating her like the most precious treasure in the world. He carefully laid her back against the soft, cool sheets, his tattooed chest pressing against her perfectly. Kendra ran her fingers through his sleek black hair, fully surrendering to the overwhelming wave of emotion. She was no longer a broken nurse hiding from her past trauma. She was a powerful woman claiming her fierce king. The night faded into a beautiful blur of intense heat and whispered promises. They completely erased the dark shadows of their painful scars. For the first time in her life, Kendra felt truly seen, fully respected, and deeply loved. The forced, blood-soaked contract was no longer just a legal trick to save his life. Their secret marriage became incredibly real, sealed with pure, unyielding devotion that no rival enemy could ever hope to break. The bright morning sun washed over the large mahogany desk in the private study. Kendra sat proudly next to Kyung-Ho, her posture straight and confident. She was no longer just a quiet prisoner. She was ready to step into her new life. The wounded legend decided it was time to show his beautiful wife the complex details of his massive empire. He opened a heavy folder filled with reports about the syndicate's legal medical supply business. Kendra leaned closer, her dark, expressive eyes scanning the long rows of numbers and delivery routes. Because she had worked long graveyard shifts managing hospital inventories, she knew exactly how medical supplies were carefully tracked. Suddenly, she tapped her finger firmly on a shipping document. Her sharp mind noticed a tiny detail that the dangerous boss had completely missed. "This route makes no sense," Kendra stated clearly, her voice echoing with natural authority. "The cooling trucks are taking 3 extra hours to deliver the sensitive medicines. Someone is secretly stopping the trucks and stealing from you before they reach the main warehouse." Kyung-Ho leaned over her shoulder, following her finger. His sharp jawline tightened as he realized she was absolutely right. The cruel rivals were quietly draining his resources. He looked down at his wife, a fierce, blazing pride lighting up his calculating eyes. The broken nurse had just proven her incredible intellectual dominance. She had officially awakened as his true right-hand queen, ready to help him destroy any enemy who dared to attack their powerful kingdom. For 2 weeks, the luxury penthouse felt like a perfect, golden dream. Kendra and Kyung-Ho lived in a beautiful, warm bubble of absolute safety. The broken nurse was completely healed by his fierce, protective love. They spent quiet evenings watching the bright city lights, sharing soft kisses and deep, whispered secrets on the velvet sofa. Kyung-Ho's injured shoulder was almost fully healed, making his powerful, tattooed chest look even more commanding and strong. Kendra felt like a true queen ruling safely beside her dangerous king. It truly felt like they had finally found their happily ever after in the shadows. However, the dark criminal underworld never truly sleeps. Down in the cold, high-tech security room, the massive wall of surveillance monitors began to flash with a silent, deadly warning. Kyung-Ho sat in his heavy leather chair, his sharp jawline tightening into solid stone. His dark, calculating eyes watched a secret digital file moving secretly through their private communication network. The careful peace of their golden cage was suddenly shattered by a brutal truth. There was a dirty, lying rat hiding deep inside his powerful syndicate. Someone was quietly leaking highly sensitive information to their cruel rivals. Kyung-Ho did not tell Kendra right away, desperately wanting to protect her soft, glowing smile for just a little while longer. But the fierce, wounded legend knew the bloody war was far from over. He slowly locked the door to his dark study, preparing his weapons. He was ready to mercilessly hunt down the traitor before they could ever destroy the beautiful, peaceful sanctuary he had built for his precious wife. The trap was set with cruel, absolute perfection. Kendra was completely alone in the penthouse when her personal phone rang loudly. A frantic voice on the other end claimed her mother had been rushed to the emergency room with a terrible heart attack. Panic instantly flooded her mind, blinding her sharp instincts. Ignoring Kyung-Ho's strict rules, the terrified nurse grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. She took a private taxi to the quiet city hospital, her hands shaking violently. But when she ran into the dark, empty parking garage, there were no doctors waiting for her. A heavy hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around.
Kendra gasped in pure horror.
Standing in the cold shadows was Damon, her lying ex-fiancé. He looked completely desperate and totally unhinged. The massive twist hit her like a painful physical blow. Damon had not just cheated on her for simple lust. He was drowning in massive, dangerous gambling debts owed to a brutal rival syndicate. "You always thought you were so smart," Damon mocked, his voice shaking with cowardice. He revealed the sickening, brutal truth. He had secretly sold Kendra's daily schedule to the cruel enemies to pay off his massive debt. Damon was the dirty rat who had orchestrated the first terrible shooting that almost killed Kyung-Ho in the clinic. He had used her innocent love as a cheap pawn to save his own miserable life. Kendra stared at the pathetic, broken man who had started this entire bloody nightmare, feeling a lethal chill run down her spine as dark vans suddenly surrounded them. The heavy metal doors of the abandoned warehouse slammed shut, echoing like a terrible death sentence. Rough hands pushed Kendra into a wooden chair, tightly binding her wrists with thick rope. Damon stood near the shadows, cowardly handing her over to the cruel leaders of the rival Korean syndicate. He counted a stack of dirty cash, grinning like a foolish rat. "Look at you now," Damon taunted loudly, walking closely up to her face. "You thought you were a powerful queen because you married a deadly monster. But you are just a weak, broken nurse all over again." He will never find you in this dark hole. A few weeks ago, those harsh words would have completely shattered her wounded dignity. But Kendra was no longer the fragile, crying woman who left her wedding dress in the trash. Her intense time with Kyung-Ho had forged a pure, unbroken core of steel deep inside her soul. She looked up at Damon with cold, expressive dark eyes. Her naturally beautiful face did not show a single drop of fear or panic. She did not cry, and she absolutely refused to beg for her life. "You are making a fatal mistake, Damon," Kendra stated clearly, her voice echoing with commanding, absolute dominance. "My husband is not just a monster. He is a legend. When he finds out what you have done, he will not just kill you. I promise you, he will bring you a kind of hell you cannot even imagine." Damon took a nervous step back, suddenly terrified by the fierce, brave queen she had become. Kyung-Ho stepped out of his private elevator, expecting to see his beautiful wife waiting on the velvet sofa. Instead, he found the penthouse completely empty. A cold, heavy silence hung in the air, instantly triggering his sharp, protective instincts. He quickly checked the security footage and saw Kendra running out in a frantic panic. When his high-tech surveillance team confirmed her phone signal was suddenly disconnected near the old city hospital, the highly disciplined mafia boss completely snapped. The calm, calculating leader vanished, instantly replaced by a terrifying, lethal beast. Kyung-Ho smashed his expensive phone against the marble wall in pure, uncontrollable rage. His fierce, blazing pride and deep love for Kendra turned into a dark, violent storm. He quickly armed himself with heavy weapons, his bold neck tattoos looking like the dark armor of a legendary warrior going to war. He called every single loyal guard in his powerful empire. "Find her," Kyung-Ho commanded, his low rumble shaking the very walls of the room. "Tear this entire city apart brick by brick. Kill anyone who stands in your way." The merciless hunt began immediately. Sleek black armored cars flooded the city streets, crashing through enemy hideouts with absolute, violent dominance. Kyung-Ho personally led the brutal attack, leaving a bloody trail of completely destroyed rivals in his wake. He did not care about business, money, or rules anymore. The cruel enemies had touched his precious right-hand queen, and he was fully prepared to burn the entire world down into gray ashes just to bring her safely back home. Inside the freezing, dark warehouse, the cruel rival boss finally stepped forward into the dim light. He held a stolen, burner phone tightly in his rough hand. He dialed the private, secret number of the wounded legend. When Kyung-Ho answered with a silent, deadly breath, the rival leader smiled wickedly. "We have your beautiful little bird," the enemy boss taunted, his voice echoing loudly across the empty concrete room. "If you ever want to see your precious wife breathing again, you will surrender your entire powerful empire to us tonight. Sign over every single business or she dies." Kendra sat tied to her heavy chair, listening closely to the terrifying ransom demand. She kept her posture completely straight, her fierce, expressive eyes refusing to show any weakness. Hiding in the dark shadows near the back wall, Damon waited like a pathetic, cowardly scavenger. He was nervously chewing his nails, selfishly hoping to pick up the leftover pieces of Kyung-Ho's massive wealth once the brutal war was finally over. He truly believed the fierce Korean legend would surrender everything just to save one broken nurse. The heavy silence on the phone lasted for 10 long, agonizing seconds. The rival boss confidently thought he had completely won the deadly game. But he did not understand the absolute, unyielding dominance of the man he was threatening. "You are already dead," Kyung-Ho's cold, chilling voice finally echoed softly through the phone speaker. "And I am standing right outside your front door." A massive explosion suddenly rocked the entire warehouse, violently throwing Damon and the rival boss completely to the dusty floor. The massive explosion ripped through the heavy steel doors of the warehouse, sending a terrifying shockwave across the dark room. Kyung-Ho did not come to negotiate or trade his powerful empire. He came to completely destroy anyone who dared to touch his wife. Dozens of highly trained guards poured into the dusty building, moving with lethal precision. The rival Korean syndicate was caught totally off guard by the brutal, sudden strike. The fierce mafia legend walked calmly through the thick smoke, his dark eyes burning with absolute dominance. He held a heavy weapon in his tattooed hands, taking down his enemies with cold, calculated shots. He moved like a perfectly disciplined storm, clearing a path straight toward the back office where Kendra was being held. The rival boss tried to run away, but Kyung-Ho's loyal men quickly surrounded him, forcing him to his knees on the dirty concrete floor. There was no mercy left in Kyung-Ho's heart. He was a terrifying beast unleashed, and he was dismantling the foolish gang piece by piece. Damon hid behind a stack of broken wooden crates, shaking in pure cowardice as he watched his entire greedy plan fall apart. He realized too late that you cannot make a deal with a wounded legend. The roaring sound of the syndicate war echoed loudly, but Kyung-Ho only had one single goal in his calculating mind. He stepped over the fallen enemies, his sharp jawline tight with deadly focus, desperate to find his beautiful queen and bring her safely back to their golden cage. While the terrifying battle raged outside the small office, Kendra refused to just sit and wait to be rescued. Using the sharp edge of a broken metal pipe near her chair, she frantically sawed through the thick ropes tying her wrists. Her breath came in short, heavy gasps, but her mind was completely clear. Finally, the tight rope snapped. Kendra quickly jumped out of the wooden chair, her dark eyes scanning the dusty room for a safe way out. Suddenly, the office door flew open and Damon stumbled inside, looking for a place to hide from the deadly mafia boss. When he saw that Kendra was free, pure panic completely wiped out his cowardly confidence. "You are coming with me," Damon yelled, lunging forward to grab her arm. He thought she was still the weak, crying woman he had easily betrayed. But Kendra had forged a fierce, unbroken core of steel. As Damon reached for her, she bravely dodged his hands and completely tackled him into the hard wall. A heavy black gun slipped from his jacket pocket and clattered onto the floor. Kendra grabbed the cold weapon without a single second of hesitation. She spun around, pointing the deadly barrel directly at the foolish man who had shattered her heart. Damon froze, raising his trembling hands in pure terror. Right at that exact moment, the heavy wooden door was kicked wide open. Kyung-Ho stepped into the room, his chest heaving. The wounded legend stopped in his tracks, staring with blazing pride as his fierce right-hand queen held her betrayer at gunpoint. The tense room was totally silent except for the heavy sound of Damon begging for his miserable life. Kyung-Ho slowly lowered his own weapon, looking at Kendra with a fierce, absolute reverence. "You hold the power now, my beautiful queen," the mafia boss rumbled softly. "You can pull the trigger, and I will gladly bury his body where no one will ever find it." Damon sobbed, falling to his weak knees and pleading for mercy. Kendra stared down the barrel of the gun at the pathetic man who had lied to her and tried to sell her to a cruel enemy. She thought about her bitter vow and the deep trauma he had caused. But shooting him felt too quick and completely beneath her new status. Kendra slowly lowered the heavy weapon, her rich brown face turning cold and strictly professional. "Killing you is too easy," Kendra stated with polite finality. "I will not get my clean hands dirty for a rat like you." Instead of a bloody revenge, she coldly handed the gun to Kyung-Ho's loyal guards. She ordered them to hand Damon over to the corrupt police officers controlled by the Kong Syndicate. Kendra used her sharp intelligence to completely orchestrate his absolute financial ruin. She made sure his massive gambling debts and dirty crimes were fully exposed to the harsh public light. Damon was dragged away, screaming in scowling horror. He would slowly rot in a high-security, shadowy, cold prison cell for the rest of his life, completely erased by the powerful, untouchable woman he once threw away like trash. The sleek armored car ride back to the luxury penthouse was quiet, but it was a deeply comforting silence. The terrible syndicate war was finally over, and the dark shadows of betrayal were permanently erased from their lives. When they stepped into their beautiful, golden cage, Kendra let out a long, exhausted breath. She went straight to the massive marble bathroom, letting the hot, steaming water wash away the dirt, fear, and lingering memories of the horrible night. When she walked back into the master bedroom, she wore a soft silk robe. The city lights poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm, natural glow across her beautiful skin. Kyung-Ho was waiting for her near the velvet sofa. He had changed out of his dark, battle-worn clothes, looking calm and incredibly handsome. The fierce mafia legend slowly walked toward his wife. To her absolute surprise, the terrifying, commanding boss gently dropped down onto one knee right in front of her. He took her soft, warm hand in his tattooed fingers, pressing a deeply respectful kiss against her skin. "You saved my life in that clinic, but you also healed my dark soul," Kyung-Ho whispered, his intense eyes shining with pure, unwavering honesty. "You showed me the brave heart of a true queen. I vow my eternal protection, my massive empire, and my absolute love to you forever." Kendra felt soft, happy tears fill her expressive eyes. She smiled, pulling her fierce king up into a passionate, breathtaking kiss that finally sealed their unbreakable, romantic bond for the rest of their lives. 3 beautiful years later, the bright morning sun poured into a highly advanced, luxurious private medical clinic in the center of the city. Kendra stood confidently in the beautiful glass hallway, reviewing an electronic chart with a glowing, peaceful smile. She was no longer working exhausting graveyard shifts for ungrateful people. She completely owned this massive, state-of-the-art facility, entirely funded by the wealthy Kong syndicate. She wore a perfectly tailored white coat over a soft, elegant dress that gently hugged her beautiful, growing belly. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, completely glowing with radiant health and pure joy. Damon was still rotting in his severe, shadowy cold cell, a forgotten ghost from a past life. As she checked the clinic's inventory, the heavy glass doors opened quietly. Kyung-Ho walked in, his tall, muscular frame looking flawlessly handsome in a dark designer suit. His sharp jawline softened instantly the moment his dark eyes found his wife. The legendary Korean mafia boss walked over and wrapped his strong arms protectively around her waist, resting his large, tattooed hand lovingly over her pregnant stomach. He looked down at her with fierce, blazing pride. Kendra leaned comfortably against his broad chest, feeling perfectly safe in his absolute, undeniable dominance. She was no longer a broken nurse who swore off love. She had completely transformed into a brilliant, untouchable mafia queen. Against all terrible odds, Kendra had built a true, lasting sanctuary, happily reigning over a powerful kingdom with a fierce monster who gave her a second chance at an extraordinary life. Sometimes, the very betrayal that breaks your heart is exactly what clears the path for your true reign. Never let the people who discarded you dictate your future, because your greatest sanctuary and your strongest power might just be waiting in the unexpected shadows. If Kendra and Kyung-Ho's journey showed you the fierce power of second chances, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who loves a story of ultimate revenge and true love. Comment down below and tell me, what was your favorite moment from their journey? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another dramatic tale of romance, power, and absolute dominance. Thanks for watching.